in. So we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Thank everybody for joining. On today's webinar, we have myself. I'm Joe Miller. I'm Director of Product here for Polarity, and who will be presenting with me is Ed Dorsey, our CTO and co-founder of Polarity. So super excited to have everybody on here and talk about channels and how to use them with Polarity. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and get everything kicked off. So before we jump into channels and how to use them, of course, going to do a few second overview on Polarity, what it is, and then our annotation framework as well, because channels really play into our annotation framework. You can't really utilize channels without that annotation piece. So as folks know, Polarity is a data-driven tool. Our whole goal is to provide information to analysts as quickly as possible so they have all the information they need to make a decision quickly. So with that, I'm just going to kind of show you a few different ways to interact with Polarity, and then I'll kind of jump into annotations, how that works. I'm going to cover channels. And then after that, I'll turn it over to Ed, and then we'll talk about a few different ways that you can utilize channels. So just go ahead and get everything kicked off here. So for Polarity, right? So you you come across some information. Here I'm just looking at Splunk. You might want to know more information about these firewall logs. You can quickly run a search. This is utilizing our focus mode. Quickly run a search and get data back from the different integrations and the tools you connect to. But not only that, you can also add and enrich information inside of Polarity. That's really what we're going to be talking about today, is that enrichment piece and how to utilize it. So if I come across this, I run a search on these IPs that are contained in this firewall logs inside of Splunk, right? I might want to add and enrich this information inside of Polarity. And when you enrich it, that's what we call an annotation. So an annotation is really just a note or something that you want to remember, or you might want to leave for another coworker. So it's just essentially that piece of information that is valuable for you to know or for somebody else to know later down the line. So there's a lot of different ways that folks can annotate within our platform. One is you run a search, you come across something, and you might want to leave a note on this IP address. To do so, you can just click the plus button here. That will pull up our annotation window. So you can leave an annotation about, it could be anything, right? It could be, this is a note. If you wanted to leave something that is more kind of enriching for other folks, say they're not subscribed to the Maximind integration, or they don't have that information in that context, you might just want to say, hey, this is a Chicago IP address. Of course, typing is it's always fun during webinars. So you might just want to leave a note on what that is, right? And that is what we call an annotation. An annotation is that note about something that you want to remember about. So we like to think of those things as entities. It's what you would annotate into the platform, or indicators. The term can kind of be used both ways. So you want to leave an annotation about an indicator or an entity. An annotation is essentially that note. The annotations can be up to 2,000 characters. You can have as many annotations about an entity or an indicator as you want. There isn't a limit on them. You can copy and paste a whole bunch of stuff in here. You can leave big blurbs and notes about them. It really is just kind of up to you as the analyst to add that information to that note about that indicator or entity. And where channels come into play is a channel is a way to organize the annotations or the data within Polarity, right? So a channel could be anything from your personal notes to known vendors, which we'll cover later, to a reference channel like Mitre attack framework. So if you come across some Mitre attack information, that could be a channel, right? So channels are kind of these buckets of knowledge and information that you have and want to keep and want to separate out. You might not want to have one running bucket with just all the data wrapped in it, because then there might not be the right context around it. A few examples of context are investigations, right? So if you're doing IR, there's different investigations that happen. So you'll have an investigation channel for investigation ABC, or investigation into a phishing scheme or a threat acting group, whatever it may be. You'll have a channel that kind of organizes that data. So that way the analyst has that context around it. So if they come across an IP address, that IP address may be in multiple channels, and each channel that that analyst is subscribed to, they'll kind of have that context that is there about it. So here, I'm just gonna put this in my my private channel that I have here, and that is annotating into my private channel. So I will only know about this information. That's not something that's shared out. And we'll cover kind of the RBAC system and sharing and kind of restricting data here in a minute when Ed goes through everything. But that's essentially how you add data into Polarity. There's multiple ways to annotate. Like I showed here, you can hit the annotate button on a particular entity, or if you're looking at something, for example, here, I'm looking at this firewall traffic. I noticed something about this 192 address. I can highlight that, hit a quick shortcut key, and pull up that annotation window. That then allows me to annotate and add those annotations into whatever channel or bucket of information that I decide to put that into. And it can be multiple as well. So if this is something that pertains to multiple investigations or should be in multiple channels, you can annotate and have that entity and annotations that are the same in multiple channels. It just really depends on that kind of use case and what you're trying to do. So with that, I'm going to kind of jump into channels, go through how to create them, how they fit in, and just kind of looking at the channel piece inside of our platform. So there are two ways to create channels within Polarity. One is just through our annotation window, like I showed here. So if I wanted to annotate this 173 address, there's a new investigation that is coming up. I'm just gonna write an annotation. This is new, for example. And then it's a new investigation. It's something that hasn't been done yet, and I wanted to create a channel for it. You can quickly create a channel just through our annotation window. So I can just start typing investigation new, for example, and then you'll see this, click here to create a new public channel. It does create it in a public manner, so that means anybody would have access to it. You then can restrict it and kind of remove access and only allow access to certain groups. That is kind of the RBAC piece that Ed will get into here in a little bit, but you will have the ability to change that if you do quickly create the channel. But for right now, I'm just going to quickly create this channel inside of the annotation window, and you'll see here the channel is created, and I can annotate this. When you do create the channel, since you as the user are the one that created it, it automatically subscribes you to it. So you don't really have to think about it. You'll just start having that information in that context as you're annotating and kind of enriching and adding data to that new channel. For example, here, the investigation new. So I'm going to annotate this and then give it a few seconds. Our annotation framework takes 5 to 15 seconds for everything to sync. So for you to get that data back. So when we talk about the collaboration piece here in a little bit, as you are working in adding information and collaborating in channels, it will take 5 to 15 seconds for that information to come back up. So here, I'm just going to run a quick search using our on-demand functionality. And you can see here the 173 address is in there, and the annotation is there inside of that investigation new channel. Excuse me. The other way to create channels is through our configure Polarity window. So as you can see here, there's a channels page. Here lists all the different channels that you have. Here you can manage those. You can restrict access. You can change colors. You can set colors, subscribe, unsubscribe, kind of do all the management pieces of a channel inside of Polarity. So here, I'm just gonna go in, and to create a channel from within here, you just hit this add channel button. When you do that, it'll pull up a create channel modal. You'll first be brought to a toggle, which is, hey, do you want to grant this to everybody in your organization, or do you want to restrict it? If you wanted to restrict it to be private, you can set it to private, and then you'll have this access list pop up here, which will then restrict it to whoever you want it to. But I'm just going to call this a new channel, or and channels, just for reference, they can have spaces in the names. It will kind of throw up this validation to let you know you can have spaces. And then you really want to provide descriptions around a channel. So even when you quick create a channel, like I showed before, you really want to go in and add a description around that if you can, because the description helps give context as to what that channel is for, or what that bucket of information is for. So I'm just going to write, this is a new channel for webinar on channels. So that way folks know this is a new channel for webinar on channels. And then you have a few other options. You have the default color. So by default, all the channels in Polarity get set to this green color. As you can see here, there's this green. And then we also have this kind of blue here. That color corresponds to whatever channels there are. If there's multiple different channels that are multiple different colors, you would see here that there would be multiple colors on kind of the left here with whatever that annotation is, and that color pertains to that channel. So here I'm going to set this as bright purple, just for kind of demonstration's sake. And then you have a few other options when it comes to creating the channels through our configure window. If when you create them through the annotation window, it will subscribe everybody to it just by default. But if you come in here, you have the option to not subscribe everybody, or just subscribe specific users. So for example, if you're working on an investigation, you only want to subscribe 5 people that are working on that investigation, you can do so. You can come in here, create that channel, and subscribe just those 5 folks. So it's fairly simple. You can just start searching for users. The user will pop up and you can add them. And then once you're done, just hit save. You'll have the modal that it's there, and it'll bring you to the different kind of options and settings for the channels. Here's where you can manage the RBAC piece of it, the color piece, which was set before. And if you do create a channel, just know that you are the owner of that channel. You have the ability to clear or delete it. Same with the Polarity admin. Polarity admin also has those capabilities. So that's creating channels and how to create channels within Polarity. One other thing I'm going to show folks real fast is navigating channels. So say you're a newer user and you wanted to see what was in channels you have access to. You can go to our Explorer and explore the channels, or if you really wanted to, you could just hit the channel and it'll take you to the Explorer and filter down that channel. And you can see all the different information that's in that channel. You can filter further if you just want to see what entities are in that channel. You can see here for the Mitre attack techniques that we have all of these T1000s in here that are annotated. So you can kind of see and explore that information before, say, you want to subscribe to it. So as a user, you come in, you don't know what this is yet, you're not subscribed, or you are subscribed and you want to see that data, you can quickly come in, click on the channel name, and then see what information is contained in that channel. So the last piece that I'm going to cover here before I turn it over to Ed to really talk about the different types of channels and different ways to use channels is our bulk importing capability. So not only can you add and enrich channels kind of on the fly in that collaborative side, you can also just upload data into Polarity. So you have a spreadsheet of assets or of the Mitre attack techniques or known DNS folks or CIDR ranges, et cetera, whatever that is. You can add that data to Polarity automatically. So you can just come in to the configure window, or if you are annotating, you can just hit the import annotation CSV button here from our annotation window, and it will allow you to import a CSV. So some things to know about our kind of importing framework. There is a particular structure that comes to importing CSVs. It's broken down inside of the platform. When you come to the platform, you can see immediately how we like the structure of the CSV to be broken out. In the first column, we want the entity or the indicator, the piece that is going to be recognized on your screen, right? If it's CIDR ranges, it's going to be like IPs or the actual CIDR range. If it's Mitre attack techniques, it's going to be the technique name, for example. That's the piece when somebody comes across it on the screen, they're going to want that context about it. So that's what needs to be in the first column. And then anything preceding that column is going to be an annotation. So if you have 5 or 6 columns, each of those 5 or 6 columns is going to be a separate annotation. So just to kind of show folks more, here is a just example of actors that might want to import. And you can see here that there is 4 different columns. This first column is name. If I import this into Polarity, this is going to be the entity. And then all of these other columns are going to be the annotations that are associated with that entity. So here, I'm just going to come back and click the CSV button. It will pull up your file explorer for whatever operating system you utilize. And then I'm going to click that CSV. And then there's a few options you'll have here. If it has a header row, you want to say it has a header row so we don't skip the first bit of data. And there's some options to skip invalid annotations, skip invalid entities. Sometimes there might be like blank columns and stuff. We don't want to annotate just anything that's blank. So you can select this to skip these. And then once you do select that, you get a preview of the CSV. So you can kind of understand what it's going to look like when you come across the information and to see and make sure it's going to be uploading correctly. And then you come down here, you can select the channel, or as kind of noted in the annotation window before, you can quickly create a channel. So I'm just going to create a channel called actors on the fly here. So all this data is going to be bucketed into that actor channel, and then click annotate. And you can see here, there's quite a bit of records here. So it's going to walk through and kind of let you know the status of it as it uploads that CSV. And with that, that is kind of an overview of our channel framework, our annotation framework, how to annotate and kind of what channels are. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he's going to walk through the different types of channels that we have, from reference channel aspect to collaborative channels.
Thanks, Joe. Let me share my screen here. So we like to break down channels into two types of channels. One is reference channels, and the other is collaborative channels. So reference channels, as the name implies, are typically containing reference data. So this is generally information that changes infrequently. Oftentimes there'll be just one or maybe two users that are managing the information in it, and you'll usually use the RBAC system to set these channels to read only, because you don't want folks adding information to it that might not be accurate or correct. So some examples for reference channels would be things like error code references. I work with Postgres a lot, so having a channel with all the Postgres SQL error codes available for quick reference is really useful. Other examples would be things like DNS resource types or the Mitre attack group's information. So then in contrast to reference channels, where the information tends to change infrequently or on a fixed basis, you have collaborative channels. And collaborative channels are contributed to organically, usually by a group of users over time. And so the information in that collaborative channel tends to evolve and is based on maybe judgments or experiences of the analysts that are putting information into it. So some common examples of this would be things like investigation notes, maybe internal indicators and network information, stuff that might not be captured in your asset management system. Or if you're not using an asset management system, it's very easy to upload that kind of data into Polarity to share it. Other data might be things like approved vendor lists, where you just want to keep track of who your approved vendors are to make sure that when an analyst is doing an investigation, like a spear phishing investigation, they know, who are the approved vendors. Is this an email that we'd expect to get? One of the key things to keep in mind here, though, even though we're talking about these two types of channels, they're really the same within Polarity. So Polarity doesn't make a distinction between something being a reference channel and something being a collaborative channel. It's really just a way to think about channels in general to kind of help you give a sense of the types of data that could be useful. Ultimately, if you have information that you think is useful for your own workflow or for your colleagues' workflow, you should create a channel and put that information in there and share it out to folks. So to give an example here of a reference channel, we'll talk a little bit about these DNS resource types. So there's a few steps here. We're going to format the data, import it, and then set some RBAC controls, and then take a look at how the information is presented to the user. So with that, I'm going to jump over to my browser here. And up on our GitHub page at polarity.io/reference channels, we have a bunch of different reference channels sets or data sets already created and configured and curated, ready to go. So I'm going to drill into our DNS resource types, and you can see here there's a CSV available. This is what that CSV looks like. And in GitHub, if you just click on this raw button here, you can easily download this by just doing a right-click Save As. So I'm going to go ahead and save this CSV. I already have a copy here, so we'll just replace it. So I've got the CSV downloaded, and you can see the format is similar to what Joe showed earlier, where the first column is the entity you want to recognize, and then subsequent columns after that are the annotations. And we're going to go into my client. And I'm going to select that CSV to import. And this one does not have a header row, so we'll uncheck that. And then we're going to go ahead and import this into our resource types channel. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on highlight mode. And now that we have highlight mode on and we have that information imported into the system, you can see here if I open up Wireshark, down here on the left, you can see this type : text being highlighted. So this is information coming right out of that resource or that reference channel that we just uploaded. So you can see here, the channel name is DNS resource types. And here's the data that we have. So as I'm going through and looking at, for example, in this example, just some PCAP data, some DNS capture, that reference data is available to me and gives me information about the different types. And in highlight mode, I can just hover over this. So if I'm an analyst that might not be familiar with all these different DNS types, that information is now at my fingertips, very easy to get to. URLs, when you annotate URLs, are also very easy to open up. You can easily open up these links and jump to that data right from the overlay window if you want to annotate a URL right into your reference data set. So that is the DNS records there. And let me go back to our slides. And we're going to show one more example here for a reference channel. This is probably my favorite. This is the Mitre attacks group information. So if we go back here, this is the imp data here. And so Mitre has a really nice list of attack groups. And, I have trouble keeping track of all these, especially the ones that are APT and then some number. And you can see there's alias for these, and then they have the description, for example, what nation state the actor might be affiliated with, if it's a nation state actor, or if it's a criminal group, maybe what the criminal group is targeting, industries they're targeting, techniques they use, etc. And so we've included this as well on our reference channel information. And all we did is we took that data and formatted it into a CSV that's just easy to import. So if you go to our Mitre channels, same thing here where we have the attack group information available. And you would import that in the exact same way into the overlay window. And then as soon as that reference data has been imported, that now is available to analysts if they want to subscribe. So showing another way to subscribe to that channel, I can click on my gear icon here in the overlay window. And I am currently subscribed to the Mitre groups channel, which is where I uploaded that information. And I've got it in this nice bright pink, so it's easy to see on the webinar. And you can see when I click into this PDF, so here I am, I'm reading a report. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You can see the highlights coming in as I'm reading the report. And then all I have to do is hover over this APT33, and here's that information on APT33. So I get all the data that I just had uploaded. So really useful to provide that kind of reference data. And you can see here's an example of those attack techniques that we uploaded. So here's the code for that technique, the T1137. But if I haven't memorized what all those codes are, here's the information available to me. This is, of course, also available just through a regular search. So if I'm looking up a particular APT actor oil rig in this case, I can also just search it as an on-demand search. But I think it's extra useful when you're getting that highlighting happening and you're reading a report, you've got an email that you're looking at, whatever it might be, where we can provide that enrichment. And that's really kind of the power of these reference channels and having that information available to analysts. So switching gears just a little bit here, we're going to talk about a tool that we have available. This is a CLI tool called the Polarity Csv Loader. And what it allows you to do is upload CSVs in an automated fashion right from your Polarity server. So the tool itself is available on GitHub. Please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like some help getting it set up. If you've already got a Polarity server, I'm going to go ahead and reload my window here. Let's take a look at this CSV tool real quick. So we're going to go over here to my command line, and I've installed the tool here. You can see it's just a little SH script here. We can run the script to kind of take a look at what is needed to upload the CSVs. And what's nice about this is that it can basically be set up to target a specific directory. It could be a file share, and any CSVs that are in that file share, it's going to upload to the server. So generally, customers will set this up on a cron job, and if you have data that you'd like to upload on a regular basis, this script makes that really easy. So let's take a look at what we're going to upload here. I'm actually going to upload this demo CSV, and it's just a small set of assets here. And in this case, it's mostly CIDR ranges. So the tool itself just needs a few pieces of information to work. We're going to pass in the server that I want to upload to, and we're going to give it the directory. And because I'm on a demo server here, I have a self-signed certificate, so I need to pass in this additional flag, but generally you wouldn't need to do that. And with that, the file is uploaded to the server, and you can see if I go back into my directory here, that CSV has been moved to the completed directory. So I can kind of keep track of which CSVs have been uploaded. Now, if I go take a look at my server, here's that information. It's been uploaded to the demo asset ranges. And let's go back to, let's actually show off the, move this Zoom thing out of the way. Let's show off that focus mode here. So I'm subscribed to that channel, that demo assets channel, so we can take a look and double check to make sure. There it is, demo asset ranges. It's going to come up in blue. And we're going to use focus mode. Here I'm looking at some proxy logs and I want to enrich those. I'm going to just grab a piece of my screen so you can see these IP addresses. And because I've uploaded that asset information, any IP address on my screen that falls into one of those ranges, I'm going to be able to get that context back from that channel. So as information is uploaded to that, as an analyst, I have access and I know about our own internal infrastructure. And you'll notice that what we did is we actually annotated these CIDR ranges. And even though I just have a IP address on my screen, we're still able to do the highlight here. So if I click over on my highlight and we scroll up and down a little bit, you can see those highlights coming in and providing that context over top of my application window, in this case, the Chrome browser. So the last thing that we're going to talk about are collaborative channels. So we kind of covered reference channels, and hopefully you got a sense of the type of data that you would be uploading for reference channels. And again, as a reminder, there's no difference really in the system between reference channels and collaborative channels. It's really just a construct we use to kind of think about the types of data you might be putting in. So collaborative channels can be a large range of things. It could be things like asset attributes. That's kind of similar to the information I uploaded here with the CIDR range. It could be things like internal indicators. So maybe you're uploading email addresses that look suspicious, but really aren't. You know, we're going to show an example of the known vendor list. And other things here include things like key phrases, words, or nomenclature that might be specific to your organization that you might want to be able to share with analysts, particularly maybe junior analysts just starting out. And there's acronyms or terms that you'd like them to know, and you can create channels, sort of living channels to capture that information and provide it to everybody using Polarity. So this first example I want to give is what we're going to do here is because collaborative channels are really about sharing information with your team, I'm going to annotate some information and then I'm going to hand it over to Joe, who's going to kind of show what that would look like on the receiving end and getting that information and how that can be used. So what we're going to do here first is we're going to annotate a vendor email. So I'm going to go back to my known vendor. I've got a list here of known vendors. And I want to annotate this newest vendor for our organization, the Booth Banana Stand. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that shortcut key that on Windows is Control-CC, and I believe on Mac it's Command-CC. It opens up our annotation window. You can see it automatically selected the text in this column. And I'm going to be adding, I've got two of my annotations here that I typed up already. We've got the best frozen bananas, and it's a known approved vendor. And then I'm going to add one more here. There's always money in the banana stand. So we'll go ahead and hit enter, and we're going to put this into that known vendors channel and annotate it. So that information is now in the system, and it's going to be available to any users. So before we hand it over to Joe, I'm going to show one more example here of an annotation. This would be like an investigation note. So maybe you're annotating some preliminary thoughts. Maybe you're working with a small team of fellow analysts doing some IR work or hunt work. And you want to share your tactical information very quickly across that group before you start finalizing things, perhaps into your tip or ticketing system. So in this example, I have going to go over to ServiceNow. We got a ticket or alert that came in from ServiceNow with a domain. And I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing I did before. I'm going to double tap Control-C. It's going to open up our annotation window. And in this case, we're going to be annotating this entity, this domain. Go ahead and clear those out. This has nothing to do with bananas. And we're going to put a few annotations in here. So we'll say, you know, we're doing an investigation on some high value assets, and maybe this is a potential phishing scam. And we'll say, you know, we've done some research and we know this is related to like a COVID related phishing attempt. We won't put this in known vendors. Instead, we're going to go ahead and put this into a very specific investigation channel. So I'm going to put it into this investigation HV or high value investigation channel and go ahead and annotate. So now that information is in Polarity, and those channels are available to anybody that wants to subscribe. And I'm going to stop sharing here and hand it over to Joe to kind of show you how that information appears in the overlay window.
Thank you, Ed. Bear with me a second here. So as Ed annotated the kind of phishing scheme, potential phishing investigation piece in from a ServiceNow ticket. Say I'm a malware analyst who's looking and kind of detonating malware. This is a tool that's out there, any app.run. I've run this COVID VBS file, and say I want to kind of see more information and see what else is kind of out there about it. So I've ran this and I get this base 64 output. We have an integration with CyberChef where I can run this through CyberChef and kind of see what the output of this base 64 is. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to do our on-demand lookup. CyberChef will only work with our on-demand. So I'm going to hold on my Mac Control C and then run that, and it will look up in CyberChef. And you can see here that it automatically broke down the base 64 and gave me the output. So now as a malware analyst, it's like, okay, I see this output. I see there's some URLs in here. There's some data. I'm just going to rerun this through Polarity and see what Polarity knows about it. And as you can see here, there's this show1.website, which Ed had just annotated from ServiceNow. So immediately as a malware analyst, I know that, okay, this is potentially related to phishing attempt. We're actually currently working on investigating this. Say this was a file that came from one of those high value assets. I might want to escalate that to the IR or the SOC team as they're investigating and let them know that, hey, there's this piece of malware that was ran. It looks like this might have been something, and maybe we need to escalate it further or take whatever action that is next. I realized when I initially subscribed to the actors channel, I'm gonna turn that off real fast just so we don't get any other crazy data coming through there. But the next example that Ed had annotated, or the first example I should say, was that known vendor. So say in the SOC, I get this email that's like, hey, there's this weird vendor. I want to, is this real? Should I pay attention to this? Is it something I need to ignore, or is this actually an invoice we have to pay? So as an analyst, a lot of times you might get screenshots of emails, you might not get the full email, you might get downloads of the emails. So with our focus mode, you can come in, highlight the information, and then see what Polarity knows about it. And you can see here immediately that we get the information on Michael from Booth Banana Stand. We can see that this is a known approved vendor, that they have really good frozen bananas. So I can go back to the person and let them know, hey, yeah, this is actually a known vendor. This invoice is real. We should probably pay it considering how it's already in the middle of July and we need to pay it by the end of July. So that's just kind of another way to show that collaboration and how the other side of an analyst using Polarity would kind of interact with the data. So when it comes to the collaboration piece, it can be a lot of different ways. Investigations, it could be collaborating on assets, could be collaborating on known vendors. It could be collaborating on who you have traveling in and out of your company, so you can keep track of who is traveling where. There's a lot of different ways to collaborate and kind of utilize that side of the Polarity channels. So with that, that is kind of our webinar on channels, utilizing channels, what channels are, what annotations are, how to annotate, and then our reference channels versus our collaborative channels. And as Ed mentioned before a few times, they are really the same thing inside of Polarity. It's just how you go about looking at the differences in the channels, right? They could be collaborative, they could be reference. For reference, for example, you might want to lock it down and make it read-only so nobody can annotate into that because it's coming from that CSV loader. So you don't want anybody ever adding data into that channel and kind of enriching it or filling it with bad information. So there is kind of that way to lock down that reference channel. Whereas collaborative, you want people annotating and collaborating and adding to We also have a commenting system built in to Polarity. So if you want to edit or you can leave a comment, you can do so. So that way you can kind of build that collaboration piece even more. And with that, I'll just kind of plug our GitHub page. So we do have all of our reference channels up on our GitHub page. We have quite a few different ones. You can just come here, polarity.io or github.com/polarity.io/reference channels. Or if you just come to our GitHub page at polarity.io and then search reference channels, you'll be able to see them there. And with that, I'll stop sharing and see if we have some questions. Looks like we do.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, I was looking at a question from Brian of, can you apply a tag to data and highlight the specific data based on that tag? So we refer to tags as annotations, but they're pretty much the same thing. I guess a tag would be like a short annotation. So you should have no problem applying an annotation to a piece of data. One thing to note is it doesn't have to be, a traditional indicator. We kind of showed in a few of those examples there where we were annotating the APT actor names or the Mitre technique codes. You can annotate those and then that information will get highlighted. There are practical limits to the length of the data that you can annotate and still have highlighting work well. So if data is spanning multiple lines, you can still annotate it, but you probably won't get the highlights for information that might be spanning multiple lines or even potentially going off the screen. So you kind of have to, if you want the highlight part to work, you kind of have to be, a little bit tactical in deciding, what part of, for example, that a malicious payload that you wanted to annotate or a variable. And kind of jumping down, I see you were asking about email headers. If there are specific fields within the header that you're looking to annotate, I definitely think that could be a good reference channel. I don't think we have anything email header related currently up on that reference channel's GitHub, but definitely something that we could take a look at. If you have ideas on the type of data that you'd like to see in a reference channel for email headers, definitely let us know. We can take a look at putting that together. We definitely would take pull requests as well on that channel if folks are familiar with GitHub and how that works. Certainly, if you'd like to share something with the community of data that you have that you think would be of value, we'd love to share that with everybody. All the data up on that reference channel repo is MIT licensed, so available for anybody to use and benefit from. In terms of, Brian, your second question there, can you have Polarity highlight data that is live and changing in real time? There is a slight delay in highlights. They're fairly real time. We were showing it to you there on a live system, so you could get a sense of the highlights coming in. It's not really meant though as a system for example, monitoring a workstation and sending that data somewhere. We'd have to kind of maybe learn a little bit more about your use case there, and perhaps we could do that offline. We could get you some contact info to talk through that. So yes, while the highlights would work if you had maybe like a dashboard up and some IPs were being populated in there, like think of like a Kibana or Splunk dashboard, things would get highlighted on that. The sending the data to another location isn't currently something that is sort of out of the box supported. Let's see here. And I think, yeah, Vladimir, can you synchronize a channel? So that would definitely be, the best way to do that right now is that Polarity CSV Loader. If there's so the way that works is one, you can have it clear the channel. So that's the most common. So for example, if you have like a nightly, so a very specific example is you wanted to load Active Directory usernames each night or information from LDAP on user accounts. So the script by default will actually clear that channel out before it uploads the data. And that way you always have the most recent information available through that CLI tool, the Polarity CSV Loader. If you don't want it to clear, then duplicate data will basically just override. So essentially what happens if you upload the same information, we just update the timestamp for when it was last applied, but you wouldn't get duplicate information within that channel. Annotations cannot include wildcards. So the way annotations work is when you're annotating, it is case insensitive, but otherwise it is looking for an exact match on the string that you're looking at. So there are some ways you can work around that. So, the most common one is, annotating domains. You might just, annotate a portion of the domain to make sure you're capturing, subdomains, for example. But yeah, right now the annotations do require an exact match, case insensitive. So if you have it in uppercase and you annotate it in lowercase, we'll still highlight it, but there's not wildcard support. And yes, I think we do always share these videos, Brian.
Yeah, they'll be available on our YouTube and I believe on our website as well.
Yeah, common PowerShell commands. And I almost want to say we have something very similar to that if we don't already have that available.
Thought we did. We might just have it internally. I might need to get up on the reference channel page, but I think we have something that's out there.
If not, oh, you know what? It might have been, maybe it was Ansible or Python.
It's Ansible and Python, and it's not PowerShell. That is what it
is. But yes, those are great. Like especially, PowerShell commands. Those are great things for reference channels because that data, it doesn't change that often. So once you put it up there, it's a really nice piece of reference information to have. Either through the highlighting or if you just need to do a quick search and you've already got the overlay window up or use the focus mode. That would be a nice one to add for us. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. So partial match, we will do substring matching. So for example, if let's say I annotate google.com and what's on my screen is mail.google.com, the google.com part of that would get highlighted. Another example might be, if you were to, if you had a big string like of a PowerShell command and it had all the parameters being passed into the command, if you just annotated the first part of it, that would get highlighted within the larger string. So it's not a partial match in the sense of, we'll match on some part of the annotation itself, but like it will match within the text that's on your screen.